Before I got into the games industry, which I'm still like 6 months in, I mean, I've worked on games and stuff before, but now I'm actually in the industry, which is awesome and intimidating and mainly awesome. Actually, I'm just really thankful and excited to be where I'm at. But one of the things that bothered me a lot before was I was like, how much time should I spend studying versus creating? Creating, it's like you build your portfolio. Studying builds your means of connection. Because if you're like, hey, yes, I know that game and I loved that game, that can be a great way to connect with people. I know that I've looked at different, like in some cases it was volunteer projects, but they were like, hey, have you played through, let's see, what was it again? It was XCOM. And I was like, no. Guess what? I didn't get in on that volunteer project. What's the balance? How do you know if you're in the balance? You do need a portfolio to get into something. Like other industries, a resume might be fine, but you need a portfolio for creative work. So you know that you need that. However, you need connections to get work. If you are talking with people in the industry and you have never played any games that are relevant to the projects that you're applying for, you're not gonna get any work. But I used to think I need to study more, I need to study more, I need to study. Let me talk about cons of both a little bit. I have had so many interviews. I hear this same phrase and it started to just scare the heck out of me and frustrate me a lot. And it was, wow, it sounds like you're awfully busy. When I heard, wow, it sounds like you're awfully busy, I knew that I'm pretty sure that what they were thinking was, you're probably too busy for us. And that really bothered me because I was like, I'm just filling the time that I'm not filling it with you, but I'd fill it with you if we had time together. Should I just like not claim that I've done a lot of stuff? Should I just like sound less productive? Like what do I do with this? This is annoying. I hate this. And then on the other hand, studying a bunch. I know people who think that they know how to make games because they play a bunch of games. And you can definitely play games with study in mind. And so you can study, you can watch Game Maker's Toolkit, you can listen to AIAS, Game Maker's Notebook podcast. I think I said the right letters. There's a lot of different ways to grow and to learn and to study. But one of the things with studying is that you also want a portfolio. You need a portfolio and you need your portfolio to grow. Here's what I've found in my own experience of the job that I got. I will say that I can't claim that this is going to be universal because I know it's going to depend on the job. It's going to depend on multiple things. But here's what I found. What matters is just creating the right things, studying the right things. It's not the amount. Let me give you an example. We are building a very heavy systems-based game, Archmage Rises. So for Archmage Rises, it was really important to my boss that I'd played Skyrim. Fortunately, I have played Skyrim. It was important to him that I had some D&D experience. Fortunately, I had some D&D experience. It was important to him that I had some different gaming experience, but there were certain games that he was interested in me having played. And actually, there's a joke around the office, and this might kind of surprise you, but that we haven't all played the same game or watched the same movie. That there's no one thing that we've all played or watched. I think that the exception to that is Skyrim. So for Defiance Game Studio, one of the critical games is Skyrim. Everything else, not everybody had. In the past, I would have thought, oh man, here's a list of games that I need to play to be taken seriously. But at my work, like all the games that have come up in conversation, all the movies as well, it's like, yeah, not everybody's watched that. But we all do good work. Like, and I feel like I can say that very sincerely. Like, I've seen my coworkers' code and been happy with it. I think they've been happy with mine as well. Every now and then there's like the apology of like, I'm sorry, that was terrible. Yes, I wrote that. That was my bad. But there's like core games, and then there's you don't care. So if you're like, hey, I want to join Defiance Game Studio, let's go to Archmage Rises website. So what do we see? A new kind of RPG. You know what? I should probably play some RPGs if I want to work here. It's like Skyrim meets FTL. I should probably play Skyrim and FTL. I've never played FTL, but I played Skyrim. So you're looking at what are the inspirations. Interviews with the leader here, with the head of the studio. Where can I find content from theirs, and what games have they played and enjoyed? And you can find a connection there. You see, ever wanted me, a mage in a medieval fantasy world, to be Raistlin, Merlin, Gandalf, Pugger, Elminster? So look up these names. If you want to like get into Defiance Game Studio, then you would look up these names. Now I want to add, I didn't know who Raistlin was when I applied. I knew who Merlin and Gandalf were, although I don't know much of the lore behind Merlin. I've never heard of Pug or Elminster. So even then, even as I'm saying all this, like, there's touchstones that matter, but you don't actually need to know everything. You don't need to know everything that the other person loves. And that was something that I got really worried about. And I was like, oh man, like I probably need to learn more. Like I'm so worried about this. And it didn't matter that much. Now here's what did matter for my interview. One of the things that mattered was that I interviewed well. Something else that mattered was that I was willing to meet with what he was looking for. He was like, hey, I need somebody in Canada. And I was like, I'll move to Canada. I didn't actually think I'd get the job, so I didn't think I'd move to Canada, but I did, and I'm glad I did. Hey, I like what Archmage Rises is trying to do. I'm excited about it. That was huge. If I was like, yeah, I don't like RPGs, I don't care about them, and I don't want to do this, yeah, guess what odds I would have had for that. So I think that the natural next question is, what do I study? And also, what do I create? So what do I study? Study games you like. I know that sounds very not helpful, but yeah, study games you like. And then if you're interviewing for a specific company, study their games. Why would I say study games you like? Because that sounds like, hey, just play games that you like. Well, sort of. I mean, you can do it with intent, and you can like look at interviews. So game study doesn't just mean playing games. That's probably obvious to most other people, but that's something that I guess I sometimes need to remind myself, is that it can mean looking up videos on it, looking at interviews on it, listening to people who have worked on the game, seeing if there are podcasts with them. Again, AIAS podcast is a great resource for that. And part of the reason is that frankly, it will be easier to do that. And part of it is that you probably will do best at making games that you enjoy playing. So games you like, genres you like, and then if you're interviewing for a specific job, study their games. If you're like, man, like I need to expand my horizons, it doesn't mean that you have to play through every game. Maybe you're like, okay, I need to play XCOM. So you play XCOM for 3 hours. And you're like, okay, I played XCOM. For some people, like if you're applying to work on the next XCOM game, yeah, that's not enough. But if you're just trying to get a general understanding of the game, that's fine. Like, you're going to be okay with that. And something that I also realized, hopefully this will help somebody else feel a lot better, you will study games on the job. Talking with people who are like professional level designers and who are working on these different things, there's games that they've played and there's games that they haven't played. Like, hey, you need to play Candy Crush Saga to understand this. Well, maybe somebody there hasn't played it. Oh no, you're fired. No, that's not what happens. What happens is you're great at your work, play the game a little bit, study it. You can study games on the job. It happens. So if you're like, oh my goodness, what if I miss this one game that's critical for this project? They're not just going to be like, you're immediately off the project. And if you're good, then they're not going to just let you go. You can study games on the job. Of course, I'm not saying study games on the job outside of what you've been permitted to or given to. But yeah, you're going to study some games on the job. So there's going to be games that you're like, maybe they're even really popular titles. And they might even if you've already played it, they might want you to just play it again anyway, just to study it. So yeah, you're going to study games on the job. And I think just knowing that, for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't have to worry about that nearly as much as I thought I did in the past. There's too many games to play every game. Don't worry about getting into every single one. Now, I will say though, played a little bit of the game. You've played a few matches about it. Somebody's like, oh yeah, it's like the fighting in Smash Bros. It's like, oh, I know what you're talking about. I know how the fighting in Smash Bros. Works because I've played it. Heck, if you can't play it yourself, at least like watch a quick Let's Play of it or a quick YouTube video on it, something, because that gives you at least a basic understanding of it. Even if you are like, man, like I can't buy all these games, I can't afford all of them, whatever the case is, there are ways that you can learn about some of them, and that can be at least enough for the next step. So what do I create? Create games in genres you like. I really need to clarify this. When I say create games in genres you like, I don't mean make your first game an MMO if you like World of Warcraft. That's the classic mistake. I know multiple people who that's what they did as their first, and they're like, I want to make games like World of Warcraft. My first game's gonna be an MMO. And I'm sorry if that's you, because I'm laughing right now, because it's very common. That's a normal thing. It's not, hey, like you can never work on an MMO, or hey, you'll never get there. It's that's not where you can start. You can't start there. You have to learn other stuff first. It could be that you're really good at a facet of game development, so you could work on an MMO in that facet. Like maybe you're a fantastic 3D modeler, and so yeah, building an MMO by yourself isn't practical, but maybe you could 3D model for an MMO. So I do want to say that there is stuff like that to where I don't want to oversimplify this, but if you're like solo creating, which I guess gets back to maybe you shouldn't be solo creating, depends, then create games and genres you like. Create games that you can make good, so that you have good portfolio pieces. I created heavily interlocking systems. So here's what's interesting. I did it in web code, but the basic concepts of, hey, how do we piece these together was critical. I created UIs for creating content. Now, guess what I'm doing right now? I am working on tooling for level designers to be able to build levels. I'm working on tooling for them to be able to set up the stages. I did stuff that is directly relevant to what I'm doing now. It's not the same exact thing. It's not in C# in Unity. Maybe that would have been better. And actually in the recent Archmage Rises update video, I got to do the last one. I was talking about the buff system, and I saw it and I was like, we could make this so much more dynamic, and I helped do that. And now it's cooler. So I will say that if you're going for AAA console or PC, then I would say in general, learn Unreal, like if you're just trying to get into something. And then if you're going for mobile, learn Unity. Learning one or the other isn't going to hurt you, but in general, like this is just kind of it. If you're going for, I should say, indie or mobile, then learn Unity. Indie can use Unreal, and AAA console could use Unity. I don't know if they do, but in general, like this is kind of if you're really just looking for what do I create, well, here's what you can create in and learn what you're trying to learn, at least if you're a programmer. If you're a modeler, like maybe Blender, I don't know Maya. I'm not as much in that, but I guess that the big thing that I've seen from all of this is that, like, I was so worried about, man, here's the exact things that I should be doing. Am I doing the exact things that I should be doing? I was very worried about that. And now I look at it and I'm like, oh, I was over worried about that. It wasn't actually as big of a deal as I thought. It was a big deal, but a lot of it was just, hey, I'm going to learn some of it on the job. I'm going to learn things that are helpful and that I enjoy. And it actually carried me really well. You could call that luck if you want. I call it thank you, God. That's okay if you don't. But I think that what a lot of people would want is, here's the silver bullet. Here's what I study. Here's what I create. And it's not a silver bullet, because there's a lot of different game jobs. You might get different ones. And also, I mean, just as I'm saying all this, I want to make sure that I say, the answer is, so what do I study? Study games you like, genres that you like, study games if you're of a particular company if you're applying there. And yeah, experiment on occasion, but don't play through every game. What do you create? Create games and genres you like. Create systems that you enjoy creating if you're a programmer. Or let's say that you're an artist. Create the types of things that you enjoy. Maybe you love doing UI. Create UI. You don't have to draw characters. Actually, UI, so specifically UI, artists are very desired in the industry. That's actually a hole, and people in general, it sounds like there's a lot of people who would rather not do UI. So actually that's a hole in the industry. And I mean, a big thing with it really was like the bigger thing was connections. And I think it's worth noting that if you start connecting with other people, you'll learn what they want. And then you can make stuff that's like what they want. Of course, like, again, if you're trying to get into a specific company, look at what they use, look at what they're doing, and do things that are similar if you can't do exactly. Like, maybe you can't use the engine that Ubisoft is using. That's okay. You can learn Unreal, you can learn the principles, and you can still move forward. I think that gives as much specificity as I can actually reasonably give. And if you have any thoughts or questions, or you're more experienced than I am, then feel free to let me know.